the greatest areas and sources of shame and defeat in your life, God can flip those around, and the enemy's not expecting it. He thinks that
Yeah.
those things are going to crush you, but God can turn them around, change your life, and use those very things to begin changing the lives of other people around you.
Hi, I'm Nick at Bandkind, and I'm thrilled to be here with Allan Scott of Found and Favored Ministries. Allan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
You guys have been letting people know about something supernatural that can happen in someone's life, and that is a turnaround, a life change, a new trajectory. Tell me a little bit about Found and Favored.
Yeah, so we started Found and Favored in 2015, and it was actually we had come to the radio station you work at, and I was there with Paul,
Paul Balash,
2012.
yeah.
Yeah, so he heard me tell my story, like, I forget how many dates we sandwiched into that week, but I think it was like 15 or something like that,
Wow.
stops, and he heard me share my story over and over and over again. And he was like, Alan, have you ever thought about going into like a drug rehab facility or something like that? And I was like, I hadn't thought of that. So I
Wow.
that I think it was that December I went to the first drug and alcohol rehab facility, and I was just really it was really profound for me to, like, it was even the one where I had had some involvement when I first got sober, and I had gone to some meetings there, and it really was impactful to me. So we started going into a lot of drug and alcohol rehab facilities, and then we started going into state penitentiaries. And in 2015, um, I was on a phone call with Mark Harris. He was in the band For Him. We had done some like little thing out in the Midwest together, and I got to stay in this house with him, which is really cool. They just rented us a house, and but he had told me, he said, Alan, you should start a nonprofit to do this sort of work. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit, like, just right on the phone call, I just felt like he just confirmed that. So we started Found and Favored Ministries in 2015. That was like the beginning of us formally having like an organization that would help organize this type of event. And then since then, we've gone into in Pennsylvania. I think we've been to about 70% of all the penitentiaries. We've been to most of them more than once, and gone into a lot of different drug and alcohol rehab facilities, homeless shelters, and then in 2020, Found and Favored Ministry started the Story Tour, an event for people maybe they're not incarcerated. It's an event that is all designed to help people that are currently struggling with addictions or struggling with just disorders, eating disorders, depression, whatever, anything, even just um, people that are having a hard time in life, believing that God is good and He's for them. We started that event, and so we've been that started in 2021. We started traveling with that event, and that's our heart, is to minister to people that are marginalized, people that are hurting, struggling, and we've seen some really crazy stuff over just the last year on the tour. And so, yeah, that's how Found and Favored started.
Unbelievable. And I want to hear about some of that stuff on the tour that you've encountered. But first, I want to just mention that I love that some key musicians came alongside you and sort of
Yeah.
just planted ideas in your mind that maybe you just thought you had a testimony. You didn't think you had a platform, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly it. I mean, before Paul had mentioned something, I hadn't thought about that. And the same thing with Mark. I mean, and they're just, it's always good to get insight and wisdom, and they had been kind of down
Oh,
the road a
yeah.
little bit. And yeah, they really influenced, just, or helped me change my thinking about some things. It was really awesome.
I love that. Well, before we get into what this event looks like, take me back to a younger Alan Scott before you were in a penitentiary on accident, not on purpose.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, give me a little backstory about you.
So, yeah, I grew up in it was kind of a Christian home, but it was, there was a lot of like fighting and stuff. My mom had a relationship outside of the marriage, and that's where I came from. And so, but my mom and the guy that raised me, was my stepdad, but I thought he was my real father until I was 23. But he decided to stay with my mom, and he raised me like I was his own kid. My mom led me to the Lord when I was 3 years old, and but there was still that all that fighting was still going on. My family moved from the West Coast to Pennsylvania, and eventually, when I was 8 years old, my parents got separated. They got divorced, and my mom or my stepdad had custody over my younger brother and I. And he decided he was going to move away. He was going to take my younger brother and I with him. And my mom was not happy about that, obviously. So, but she actually kind of kidnapped us from him, and she had us on a custody visit one weekend. He had an apartment, or she had an apartment, and they didn't know, he didn't know where she lived, and they would just like drop us off at the local mall. And I remember
Yeah.
this one weekend, she said, "Alan, you're not going to see your father again." And so I remember when I was 8 years old, that was heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there were the couple years in there where my mom raised us as a single mom, and so that's when I started playing guitar. My younger
Mhm.
brother got a guitar. I stole it and took it from him, and but when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I started getting wrapped up in drugs again. My mom got remarried. It was that, and it was great. That was a crazy situation, but I had already started running from God, and by the time I was a senior in high school, I dropped out of high school. I was in my
Mm.
first drug and alcohol rehab, and I got out of that rehab. I didn't want to change. I didn't want
Yeah.
God involved in my life, and so I just kept going. And I was a thief. I stole from everybody, my family, my friends, and eventually that led me to, I stole a bunch of drug. I stole drugs and someone's car and money from a drug dealer actually, and then I
Mm.
went to Dallas, Texas, and lived there and just smoked crystal meth for a while. Eventually, I had nowhere to live. I was just a loser, and that scared me. That time down there really scared me. And I eventually came back to Pennsylvania, tried to get my life back together without God. I didn't want God to be involved in my life. But eventually, I was just right back where
Wow.
I started, but I was worse. And I was a trash can. I wasn't like addicted to any one thing. I was addicted to everything. I was addicted to the lifestyle. So I would put whatever I
Mm.
could into my body, and was just always high, and so eventually I got to this point where, I was always on the run. I was on the run from the police because I had many, many warrants out for my arrest for, for my whole adult, from 18 on. And I
Yeah.
was always running from them, and I was always covering up, I was a liar. I hated who I was. And so I was always lying about myself, and I was always stealing from people. I did it constantly. And so I always had my
Mm.
head over my shoulder,
Yeah.
you know, and I was running. I eventually got to this really low point, and I said, God, if you don't do something, I'm never going to be able to change. Like I just knew I wasn't going to be
Wow.
able to change. And I remember thinking these exact thoughts, like, Alan, you're gonna be a liar, loser, drug addict, and a thief for the rest of your life. You're never gonna be able to get out of this. And I knew I couldn't. But I remembered, my mom had led me to the Lord when I was 3. And so
Yeah.
I remember that when I was in my lowest point. And I was like, well, so I knew who God was. And I just shot up a prayer. I was even drunk one night, and I was probably high because I didn't really usually drink without a lot of other stuff that followed. And I said, God, I need you to help me. And
Mm.
and then I forgot about that prayer, and I walked away.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
God has an excellent memory. And a couple months later, Jesus, with the help of the local police department, caught up with me, and I got locked up. And I remember that I
Mm.
was there. It was about 3 weeks that I was locked up before I began to have like thoughts where I was like, maybe God is trying to do something for me
Mm.
that I can't do for myself. And so I uh, I began to read my Bible, and I began to whatever I could do in that cell. And I would go to I don't know if you hear the truck outside. Sorry about that.
No, I
but
don't.
I would go to all the meetings that would come into the prison. I would go to the Bible studies, whatever would come in. I was just so desperate.
Mhm.
And there was also, I began to hear these songs, and I would write down the lyrics in my jail cell. But there was no guitar, but there was one in the rec area, and in that rec area, we would get about an hour a day. And there was an old guitar, had rusty strings on it, looked like it hadn't been played in a long time. And I would begin to try to work out the melodies that I could hear in my mind.
Wow.
I was, and I think that speaks to, like, God puts dreams in our heart. He puts desires in us, and the enemy comes and tries to tramp that down and to steal those things away from us. But God's ability is greater than the enemy's ability, and
Amen.
you're never washed up. But I
Mm.
was there for a while. Eventually, I went to a rehab, and there was a Christian counselor there in a secular rehab. His name was Andre. He would take me to his church every Sunday. I
Wow.
remember this one Sunday, God just really began to speak to me. I remember crying for quite a while after the service, and God began to change my heart and just began to do things inside of me. And I got out of that rehab eventually, and I just had to begin doing whatever God put right in front of me. And so I got plugged into a new community, got plugged into a church, and joined a worship team. I wasn't any good, I don't think. I think they let me on just so that I could
Wow.
be plugged in. And
Mhm.
because I was at the church then Tuesday for practice, Wednesday for church. I'd be
Yeah.
in that environment, and so but yeah, that was October of 2001 was the last time I had a drug or alcohol in my body, and God began to give me a new life. It was a life that I couldn't have earned, and I met my wife, who is an ex cocaine addict, and she
Mm.
has a story of just rapes and
Mm.
abortions and drug addiction. But she's been sober today for a year longer than me, so she's been sober for 22
Wow.
years. We've been married for 16 years, have a six-year-old daughter, and now we have this ministry. God took the things that were the biggest negative in my life, the weight that I carried around, and he turned it into the most positive thing. And that's what God does. Our whole ministry now is defined by that. And that's what
Yes.
he does. He turns our negatives, he turns our liabilities, and he takes them and transforms them and turns them into our greatest assets. And I think that's the beauty of the gospel and the beauty of what Jesus can do in a life. And it's really the idea that we want to share with the story tour, that you are not washed up. You are not too far gone. Your story's not over. And the greatest areas and sources of shame and defeat in your life, God can flip those around. And the enemy's not expecting it. He thinks that
Yeah.
those things are going to crush you, but God can turn them around, change your life, and use those very things to begin changing the lives of other people around you.
Hmm.
So that's kind of
Whew.
that's my story.
Yeah. Wow. It's powerful. It's powerful. Absolutely. And I think that for someone who hasn't walked the road that you've walked, it would be really difficult to stay at the task of helping people that are so in need of having that script flipped in their life in Jesus' name. And I think that you must have some special mercy and compassion for them because of what you've gone through. Do you feel like you do?
Yeah, and I think also when God calls you to do something, like, it hasn't always been easy.
Yeah.
It actually has rarely ever been easy.
Mm, wow.
And but I think that when God, he comes in there, and when he calls you to do something, you just can't get away from it.
Mm,
And so I feel like I feel like I've got energy inside of me. And there have been a lot of times where I've wanted to quit, but I feel like, that's the thing about God calling you to a specific thing. He will give you the grace. And what does that grace look like? It looks like just a desire, an urge. Like, I don't think I could be happy doing anything else. As a matter of fact, I have done
wow.
other things.
Mhm.
I worked for many years in banking alongside of the ministry that I had, and kind of developed a career there.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was an underwriter, the most boring job on the planet. I just sat there and looked at financial documents and credit reports all day in a dark room.
Wow.
And but I could never get away from it. And so, that's, yeah, God has put a desire in my heart to reach a certain group of people. He's put a desire in my heart to play music, and God just works
Mhm.
everything together and
Yeah.
makes it, he works it together in a way that only he can. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. It's God putting the energy inside of you to do something, and just not letting, there was, it some of the, I think it was Jeremiah, one of the prophets, they had a tough job. I mean, sometimes people hated them. And he said, but God has put a fire in my bones. Like, I have to
Wow.
do what I'm doing. So it's like
Wow.
he gives you grace and it compels you to do something. And so that's what I think it is.
My goodness. Well said. Well said. The church is very important to what you guys do, but not in the way that most people would think. It sort of comes afterwards, because you're trying to gather people together in places that are, um, maybe more welcoming, or have a more welcoming perception than a church. I don't mean to
Yeah.
say that a church isn't welcoming, but with the kind of people that you are wanting to attract to these events, church isn't going to be the first stop they make.
No, I mean, a lot of people are high. There was a guy that came in and Saturday night, and he was high. Like, he was high on fentanyl or heroin, and he was like, nodding off, and just like, someone is high on heroin, they just kind of have this wobble, in
Mm,
their walk and everything. And so, and there
mm,
are people going, when we first got there, at the beginning of the show, there's a lady we were meeting with, and her husband, they're getting a divorce. She's in tears. Her husband's out in the parking lot. He won't come into the event, and so we're going out and trying to get him to come in and praying with him. And so
oh
these
my
people
gosh.
they're
Wow.
really beat up. And so the first stop for someone who's beat up is probably not going to be a church. God
Yeah.
works and draws people where they're at, so we are holding, like, the rest of our events this year, are in theaters or in high school auditoriums. And that's because we think that people are going to be more open. And
Yeah.
then the way that the church plays a huge role in this is that after we leave an area, we always try to get people plugged in to these
Mhm.
churches, because
Yes.
we're going to leave, but the church is going to stay and do the work. And so we saw that even when we came back to Maine this year. So we were there a year ago in 2021, and there were two guys there. Travis, who is one of the guys that is speaking on the tour and just has a
Mm,
crazy story. He actually
yeah.
went in. It was called the Brown House. He went into the Brown House last year, and it's a crack house. It's a drug house, and everyone knows about it in this town. And he went in and invited a bunch of the guys to come. They were high. They're like peeking out the windows and all, scared about, because when you get high like that, you get paranoid. And
Mm.
so, but they said he could come into the Brown House, and seven of the people came out that night. Two of them got saved, and
Oh my
got plugged into the local churches. One guy went to Teen Challenge,
Wow.
and another one of the guys, we went after the event. He dumped all his drugs and his alcohol down the drain and in the trash. And so when we went up
Wow.
there this year, they have stayed plugged into these churches, and they were still sober. We met them
Oh my
again,
God.
and the one guy is with Teen Challenge, but plugged into a small church up there, and the other guy is also, he didn't go to Teen Challenge, but he was plugged into a church called the Fortress Church, just a little tiny church up there, but they're on fire for, just on fire for
Yeah.
their community and God. So those
Yeah.
churches played a crucial role, like, in providing, discipleship and support. And
Yeah.
so that is, like, the church is indispensable, because that is like how God works in the lives of people and
Yeah.
communities. And so, yeah, we try to hold events in neutral locations, and
Mhm.
then we rely on the body of Christ to kind of surround people. And
Yeah.
yeah, so to answer your question in a very long,
Ooh,
long way.
no, that's great. Oh, you bring tears to my eyes. Um, the church, I mean, that's how we are the hands and feet right there.
Right.
It is a tough journey, and it's not a quick one. And how do you stay connected with the do you stay connected with the churches? Do you stay connected with the people over your years of ministry? What has worked best for you?
Yeah, so we definitely stay connected with the churches and the people, especially on on the story tour. People we get stories and messages from people usually after an event, for like a week or so after an event, the stories
Mhm.
start coming in, and
Mm,
so we try to be very responsive with
yeah.
people, whether it's like through email or social media. There was a girl who had come to an event in Michigan, and she had got saved and actually canceled an abortion she had scheduled for the following Monday. So we reached out to her, and we and then we tried to. I got a network of churches that were willing to raise support for her to,
Mm,
because she's gonna have a new kid or new baby. I don't know if she would choose to have someone
yeah.
adopt that child, but we
Right.
try to
Mhm.
like stay in contact, and we also have a lady that works for us. She's great. Her name's Jody, and she definitely is always staying in contact with the churches that we've been to. And so, yeah, through all means, whether it's social media or phone calls or, emails, we definitely try make it an effort to do that.
It's such a good work. And I want to ask, after we talk about the event, I want to ask how people can plug into you to help support your ministry. So, when someone's walking into these events at the story tour, what will they encounter?
Well, the first thing I got to point out is it's a show, and that's how it's advertised. It's advertised as a show. So, like, what you're not going to walk into is, a revival service with someone
Right.
drinking snake venom, and like, it feels like a show. So, you're going to be entertained. And that's the disarming part of it. You're going to walk into an event that has been engineered. And what we use, the ideas that we're communicating are we use music, we use stories via video, super high entertaining moments and kind of low emotional moments. It's
Mm,
kind of a
good.
journey. And the idea is that you are going to believe by the end of the show, despite all of the baggage maybe you have from church or whatever you think in religion, we're trying to communicate to you that your story with Jesus isn't over. There can be a new chapter. And we're not going to do that by like trying to give you a 7 point sermon series, or we're gonna showcase stories of people who have been where you are, and
Hmm.
we're gonna show the proof that God has done something powerful in their life. And they're not stock videos we found on the internet. These are people that we know. Yeah, all the stories are people that we know. They're all firsthand stories. They're stories of people that we know. We saw God move in their life. We vetted. Two of them are from my a local church that I grew up in, and one is
Wow.
lady is a church that Travis goes to, and he's a pastor at. And then Travis and I share our stories. And Travis was a drug user, a heroin addict, and also tried to commit suicide. And I have my story, which you heard. But so we try to share a wide variety of stories, and it's a very emotional experience, but it's also it's got all the kind of elements of like a Broadway show too. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to be entertained. We're going to sneak up behind you with Jesus, and we're not going to we're going to try to convince you, and maybe that isn't going to be the night that changes your life. For some people it is, but maybe it's
Mhm.
just a seed that God is planting, that somewhere down the line, something's going to happen and you're going to remember. So that's the
Ooh,
idea. That's the story tour. And the idea is to communicate that your story isn't over. And with Jesus, there's a new chapter that's coming.
I love that. And you are a very talented singer-songwriter, just musician, and I'm grateful that you had that guitar from your brother and that guitar in the prison, and that it's turned into this kind of an opportunity for a live show, that is changing people's lives and
Well,
that is
thank you.
going to follow them. Tell us how people can support you.
Yes, we're a registered nonprofit. So we specifically supporting the story tour and what we're doing. someone can go to supportthestory.com, and there is a whole website with breaks down everything that we're doing. It shows you what our needs are. Also shows you some recaps from different events and stuff like that, so you can try to get a feel without being at the story tour, what it's about, what it's like for the people that attend. So then go to supportthestory.com. That's the URL and the website. It has all the information there.
That's great. That's good. And we'll put that up on the screen so that people can go there and see that. It's just a phenomenal mission, life's mission, and no doubt a tiring one for your family, but what a reward, what a reward. I get the sense that you're not living for rewards here on earth as much as you are in heaven.
Well, God will decide at the end of the day, but I mean, there's the pull, writing music, you want as many people to hear it and cheering crowds and all that stuff. But I think we've always been a more of a ministry band, and so that's more of our focus. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing, and yeah, I guess God will decide at the end, where my heart was at. Sometimes I
Mm,
feel that pull, and it's easy to get caught up in that metrics
mm,
and stuff.
mm,
But
mhm,
yeah, I
mm.
hope I'm living for the right thing.
Tell me about these new songs you've written.
We want to record another album, but we have started with songs that we feel are like, pretty upbeat,
Yeah.
and all have a very specific message, about, that kind of are very, they go along with our ministry and the idea of hope and that Jesus can change a life. And so, but yeah, the idea is to, we go in November, December, we're going to record three more tracks. So that'll put us up to six, and then we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, we do want to single them. We're gonna release them as singles, and then they'll all get lumped onto a bigger project.
And that will be the Allan Scott Band project?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love it. Oh my goodness. Very, very exciting. Very exciting.
Thank you. Well, thanks for your support. I mean, I really appreciate you giving me the time.
Oh gosh, are you kidding? I love it. I mean, I'm grateful. I'm grateful you're doing it. I'm grateful.
Yeah,
I want people to know about it.
absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.